Greetings everyone, I'm Kevin and it's time to pick the best book of March. So as always, I have no idea which of these 8 books I'm going to pick. I can tell you that one book that I am not going to pick is My Brother's Name is Jessica. So let's just erase that right away. And I could actually take away The Tempest and Lilac Girls as well, because these 5 books to the left all received 5 stars. And that is why this month is going to be extremely difficult, because I have 5 books that received 5 stars. So I will just take away The Tempest and Lilac Girls. So we are left with Vitsvit, White Blight in English, Girl Serpent Form, Something to Talk About, Illuminate, and Last Night at the Telegraph Club. And yeah, this is not the easiest thing. I will just move these up so we have all of them kind of like together. So as always, I am just going to go through them one by one, explain what is it about and why I enjoy it. So the first book we have is Vitsvit and White Blight in English. It's a novel in verse. It is very, very short. It's 70 pages long and it's written by Athena Farrokhzad, who is a Swedish author. And the book is, I don't really know how to explain it. Every kind of page, it's very like graphically beautiful, because every page with like the lines, the page is in white, and then the lines, the text is also white, but it has like a black box around, kind of like a highlighter, that you do in documents. You can highlight text, but instead of highlighting in kind of like yellow or something, it highlighted it black so that the text is white. I felt that was just graphically appealing, a nice change. But this book deals with racism and being Middle Eastern, coming to Sweden, like immigration and things like that. It's just a lot of conversations about the differences between Sweden and where they came from, coming to Sweden. Every line is kind of like my mom said, and then what the mom said, and then my dad said, and what the dad said, and my brother said, my grandma said, and things like that. And I just thought the entire thing was very beautiful. And there were a lot of places in the book that I had to like pause and take a picture of, because the quotes were so brilliant and so beautiful, and I absolutely recommend reading that book. And the reason I really enjoyed that book and the reason I gave it 5 stars is because even though the book is 70 pages long, and even though not every single page of those 70 pages is actually filled, it's usually just less than a half page with lines. So there's a lot of like empty space in this book, but it was really beautiful. The whole kind of like conversation in the book about identity, and there were a lot of scenes in the book that kind of really got to me. It kind of illustrates the whole issue of being from the Middle East and immigrating to Sweden, and what kind of shows what white Swedes think, or what a lot of like Middle Eastern people in Sweden, the reactions that they get just for who they are, for their appearance. And I think this book, even though it was published, I'm not going to say a long time ago, but at least 10 years ago, it's not a very, new book, but it is very relevant. We do have a political party in Sweden called the Sweden Democrats, Sverigedemokraterna, and they are very Islamophobic. And they have the kind of like, one of their kind of logos or, lines that they use is "Keep Sweden Swedish, Håll Sverige svenskt." And that is something that I think is just extremely problematic. Every time I come across someone in Sweden who speaks that way about people who immigrate to Sweden, I'm just like, nope. I'm always debating them because I don't agree. Like, honestly, I am extremely pro-immigration, and I kind of discussed that a little bit in my video about illegal. You can see it up there. And that whole thing that we should, cleanse Sweden from people who are not fully Swedish is just, flashback to the Holocaust and hello Hitler again, with the whole thing that if you're not Aryan, if you're not a white Aryan German, you don't belong in Germany, like back in the mid 40s, and around that time. It wasn't a new idea. But to have that in contemporary Sweden is just very icky to me. I think this book, it's definitely a book that I am going to use in education because it is short and it is gripping and it's easy to understand. I think this book is extremely important and I think everyone can learn something from reading that book. I just think this book is very, very important. So let's move on to the next book. So then we have Girls Are From Thorn, which I read, obviously. And this book, I really enjoyed this book from the beginning. The whole thing that a princess was a monster, I felt that was really cool, And she had she had a curse. She was cursed and no one knew she existed except for her family. Her mom and her brother. I don't remember if he was her twin or if they were just close in age, but they were close in age. I remember that. She grew up with this curse. She couldn't touch anyone because if she touched anyone, they would die. And she had accidentally killed butterflies and things like that, which gives me kind of like Shatter Me vibes, The main character in this book, I don't remember her name, unfortunately. She has this curse that she has to deal with and she just wants to get rid of it and she does everything she can to be normal because this curse has kind of labeled her since childhood, that she couldn't, it limited her for what can she do and what can't she do, and she gets help. And there's this whole thing with her and a div, which is Old Persian for demon. And that is something that I really enjoyed about this. She wanted to kind of take inspiration from her own culture and look at old Persian tales and things like that. And I think that's so brilliant when authors, especially with fantasy, if they find inspiration in their own culture. I think that is always, it's really cool. Fantasy is not really my thing anymore. I realized kind of not that long ago that the only fantasy stories that I actually enjoy is Lord of the Rings. That's the only one. I have an issue with YA fantasy because I usually find it lacking a lot of things, but this one, Girls Are From Thorn, I really enjoyed it, and I felt the whole thing with the divs and the demons kind of thing and the beings. I felt all of that was very intriguing, and I really loved the main character and this other character who is the love interest. I really enjoyed a lot of things in this book. It was just very, very good. I can't say that much more without spoiling it, so let's move on to the next book, which is Something to Talk About. This book is a female romance. We have a closeted lesbian producer. She has worked in showbiz since she was a teenager. She is now almost 40. I don't think she's over 40. I don't remember, but she's around 40 years old. And she goes to this kind of red carpet event, and she doesn't want to go there alone. She wants kind of a buffer, so she brings her assistant Emma, and Emma is bisexual, which Jo Jones, who is the producer, the older woman, she does not know that, and Emma is taken to this red carpet event. There was kind of a moment where misunderstanding. Emma ends up on the red carpet with Jo, and Emma wants to kind of run away, but Jo keeps her there and to kind of ease the tension and make Emma relax. She makes jokes and Emma laughs, and it's all on camera. And it becomes this kind of scandal, and on a lot of magazines that they might be in a relationship, because Jo had never brought anyone to a red carpet event. She always goes alone. But this time she ends up on the red carpet with a woman who is her assistant. Jo has her, like when she keeps Emma on the red carpet, she has her hand around Emma's wrist. So it looks like it's kind of like a romantic embrace kind of thing. And she makes Emma laugh, and that whole thing looks intimate on the pictures. And so people are like, they're in a relationship, you know, they're in a relationship. But Jo really just like denies it. She doesn't say anything to the reporters and journalists because she never talks about her love life. And because of that picture, because it kind of like framed these two women in a romantic way, Jo, who is the producer, gets a lot of like backlash from colleagues, bosses, the media, for being queer. So she faces a lot of kind of like homophobia, or like mild homophobia, and a lot of prejudice based on a rumor of her being in a relationship with a woman. And she handles it really, really, really well. And then she finds out that Emma is bisexual, and the two women kind of grows closer. But the issue is always that Emma is 16 years younger than Jo, and also her assistant. So there's this age gap between them and this power imbalance, kind of. But the attraction grows between the two women, and it's just a lot of things about this book that I really enjoy. There are a lot of themes explored with homophobia, misogyny, and racism. I forgot to mention this, but Jo is Chinese American. At least from what I remember, she's Chinese American. I know she's Asian American. I think she's Chinese American specifically. And her name isn't actually Jo, but her name isn't actually Jo Jones. She got her first role as a teenager, and the world wasn't kind of ready, or Hollywood wasn't ready for a Chinese name in Hollywood. So she chose Jo Jones as her kind of like pseudonym, or you know, pen name, or whatever you want to call it. I don't really know. Stage name is what it's called. Stage name. She chose Jo Jones as her stage name because that was easier for the world to kind of accept, but that's not her actual name. And I think that was also something that I thought was very interesting to learn about her past in showbiz, and what it was like to not only start off as a teenager, but also being what it was like to be Asian American in showbiz since being a teenager, and like everything that she went through because of that. I thought all of that was very interesting to learn, and I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed the relationship between two women, and there were a lot of things that brought them together. I don't want to spoil anything, but this was a very cute romance. And I just realized that the only 3 books in this on this list out of these 5 books that has a romance and kind of not as a main focus, but it's there. Girls Are From Thorn, female, Something to Talk About, female, and Last Night at the Telegraph Club, female. Illuminae has a male-female romance in it, but it's very like small. It's not as central to the plot as it is in Girls Are From Thorn, Something to Talk About, and Last Night at the Telegraph Club. And Svit doesn't have a romance in it at all. It's about family and identity and racism and immigration and things like that. And Something to Talk About is the only one that I would refer to as a romance out of all of these. But then we move on to Illuminae, which is a science fiction mixed media book. It is this thick, and there are just I have a lot of thoughts about this book. I really enjoyed this as a science fiction nerd myself. I really loved the whole concept of it being mixed media, which it had kind of like it had interviews, it had diary entries, it had illustrations of the ships, it had just a lot of like graphics in it that kind of rounded the entire story, gave it a lot more depth, and there was a lot more for me as a reader to get from it and to learn from it and to kind of understand about the story, if you know what I mean. I don't know. But I felt that was really, really fun, and I love the story of it. It took a while to really piece everything together, but I really enjoyed it. And the audiobook, I can absolutely recommend the audiobook, because the audiobook kind of makes it feel like you're listening to a movie. It has music, it has sound effects, and like every single person has their own voice or narrator, and everything just... Ja, Athena? Hej! Athena is saying hi. Hey, gumman, vad gör du? But anyways, there were a lot of things to discuss about this book, but I feel like a lot of the things that I want to say about this book are spoilers, and I don't want to spoil anything, like I always say. But what I can say is that this has it has a mystery at its core, kind of space mystery, and the main characters are trying their best to kind of piece it together and to kind of solve this mystery, and that gives it a lot more. It was very interesting, and the fact that we got to follow a lot of different characters from different places was also very, very fun. And at the end of the book, there was this twist that I was like, oh, I just really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. So this was the only science fiction of this list. We have a very nice kind of mix. We have a novel in verse, we have a fantasy, we have a romance, we have a science fiction, and we have a historical. Ja, vad är det? We have these kinds of conversations sometimes. But then we move on to Last Night at the Telegraph Club. And this book is about a Chinese American in the 1950s in San Francisco, and what it's like to be Chinese American in the US, living in Chinatown, and the racism that comes with that, as well as the time specific, and at the same time realizing you're not straight. I felt that was also very, very, like, these kinds of, coming of age queer novels always hit close to home. As a queer person myself, it's always such a beautiful thing to read queer people coming to terms with their queer identities, regardless of the identity, no matter if it's a person coming to terms with being bisexual or gay or trans or none of it. I love those stories where we follow a character as they're figuring out who they are. I just think that's really beautiful. So we have this main character who is, I am so sorry, I forget names very easily. It's been a while. It's the 18th of April when I'm filming this, so I am a little bit late, but this book, it is the romance between a Chinese American and a white woman. This book also has a lot about like the racism that Asian Americans face in this time, because there were a lot of like things that happened over in Asia, or specifically like China and Japan during the 50s and around the 50s. So there's a lot of like time specific things. And this girl that our main character becomes friends with, and she finds out that there are rumors about this girl and that she likes other girls and that she was caught making out with a girl in school. But our main character, she doesn't care. They stay friends, and this girl helps her figure out who she is. And there's this bookstore that our main character finds, and there's this book that has a lesbian relationship. Or I shouldn't say a lesbian relationship, a female-female relationship at its core. And she reads it and she's like, oh my god, this is possible. Like, a woman loving a woman is possible. And that book ended like, I want to know if that book actually exists. I don't know if I want to read it, but I just want to know if it exists. Our main character also, through this new friend, she finds out that the Telegraph Club exists, and the Telegraph Club is, you guessed it, a queer club with like women who love women, men who love men, women who love women and men who love women and men, and cross-dressing and stuff like that. And our main character and her friend become close to other queer people that they met in this club, and there are just a lot of things happening in it that are just very, very difficult to read, but also very, very good to read, very fun to read. And I also, with this book, I want to recommend, like, at the end, Malinda Lo added a lot of like her research, and so at the absolute end you can read both what she found in like doing her research, what it was like to be Chinese American, Asian American, and the fact that people weren't called Asian Americans at that time, they were called Orientals. And she explained why she used the terminology that she used in the book that are today seen as racist. Like the N-word is used in the book because that was the socially acceptable term to use for black people. So black people in this book were called the N-word because that was the socially acceptable term to use to black people in the 1950s. And in this, like, the last part, she also explains what she found out about San Francisco in the 1950s. And, like, all of her research is, or not all of it, but a lot of the research is kind of summarized at the end. And then she also had, like, a list of literature that she read and documentaries and stuff like that to kind of prepare her to write this book, to kind of fact check what happened, what was it like, and things like that. But this has a lot of trigger warnings that are, you know, time specific with, as I said, racism, racist language, things that today would not be okay, and homophobia, of course, as well. But I still think this book is beautiful. It's a very beautiful book, and I love the relationship in it. The romance in it was really, really well done. I thought that was just absolutely beautiful. So now we're at the difficult part. Which book do I choose as best book of March? I hate this part of this video. I love kind of like digging deeper into the book, and this is why I love this book. But when it comes to actually picking a book, I'm like, I can't do it, I can't do it. What? But I'm gonna like begin by taking away Illuminae, because Illuminae was good. It was really good, but it's not the best out of these 5. And this is another thing that I have discussed in the earlier in January, best book of January and best book of February. Do I pick a book that I think is important, or do I pick a book that I enjoy? Do I pick the book that I think is most important, or do I pick the book that I enjoyed the most? And I chose The Henna Wars for January because it was both important and enjoyable. But these, I don't know. I mean, like, Vit Svit was very good. It's both very important, and it's also very, it was very enjoyable, and it was also extremely important. I think the difficulty here is the fact that all of these books are important and enjoyable. Okay, I'm gonna take away something to talk about. Don't ask me why, I just felt like that was the right choice. So now we're left with a contemporary, a fantasy, and a historical. Okay, I have decided which book I'm going to pick, and if you want, you can pause and go down to the comments and tell me which book do you think I'm going to pick. Vit Svit, Girls Are Born, or Last Night at the Telegraph Club. And then when you've done that, you can unpause this video and see which book I actually chose. So you can do that right now if you want to. But the book that I'm going to pick for best book of March is Last Night at the Telegraph Club. So I'm putting Last Night at the Telegraph there. So there we have it. January, February, and March done. And this is going to be very interesting to for the second round. You know, after I've done June, it's the second round, because then I am putting in July, August, and so on, and choosing between both which book is going to July and which book is the best of these two. Ding. And then from August the same, and then which book is the best of these two, ding, and so on, until I have 3 books down here and only 1 winner. That was it for this video. I hope you enjoy as always, and please let me know which book was the best book of March for you. Until next time, good reading. Bye!